Yeah, we're back. Hi, guys.
Stop clear out sale is on now.
Support your immune system naturally. Join the olive leaf extract revolution.
Welcome back to the show, Dr. Ken Johnson. Ken, how are you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, anytime, absolutely. Well, you got a new book out, which it's funny the way this worked out because we didn't plan this or anything, but your book and I just put out a 2-volume set on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and our books
Hey,
came out
boss,
like,
good seeing you
at
here.
a really similar time, and both on the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I'm really excited about yours. I've read it through. It's amazing. One of your best, in my opinion. It's called Ancient Prophecies from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that's going to be the topic of today's show for everybody that's watching. So let's start with, well, actually, where you start off in the book, the Essene community and how the discovery of the scrolls was actually predicted. Can you talk about that?
Wow.
Yeah. In Isaiah chapter 29, it talks about a time when Israel comes back. And it starts off just real briefly. God is angry with Israel, and then he sides with the invading forces and obliterates Israel. Well, that has to be 70 AD. And then all of a sudden it kind of switches. It doesn't tell you it's switching, but you know how prophecy is. All of a sudden now the Lord is bringing them back. He's angry with the other guys. They're going to attack Israel, but the Lord wipes them out like it was a bad dream, just like in a second. So it's obviously two separate wars. So if it was 70 AD when they left, it has to be 1948 when they come back. And then it says in that time period when they come back and the war happens and is over in just a matter of days, the old ones begin to speak out of the dust of the earth. And so if you take that literally and know the history of the scrolls, where the main professor had the way for funding to buy the first scroll, finally got enough money, went down to buy the first scroll, which happened to be the great Isaiah scroll where that prophecy is at, and then realized that morning he bought it, and they started to go back to the university with it, and found out he couldn't get there because of apparently not being into politics. He learns later that Israel declared itself to be a nation, and the war started. So, I mean, you can't get closer than that within a single day. So it's an amazing story that they tell, historical story. But with that in mind, then Isaiah 29 is telling us at a certain point, the old ones would begin to speak, and we would have at the very least history, if not other prophecy. And currently we should pay attention to it, much like Daniel says in chapter 11 and 12, that knowledge will increase in the last days.
Yeah, it's a fascinating point in history, and a lot of people look to that time to as sort of like that's where the countdown, for prophetic things begins, and like that's where like the end, almost like that's where the end times, or like the last part of our age or something. We can look to Israel for these things. Do you agree with that? Do you think that 1940? Do you think that time was really significant prophetically, where we could look at that and see, like, okay, now we can really start counting down the time till the Lord's return?
Yeah, I think so. We can't really set a date per se, but at the same time, there's all these points of generations and jubilees. They have their own calendar system. And the church fathers, when you plug in the church fathers that are not connected at all with the Dead Sea Scrolls, but when you plug them in, they have records of the school of the prophets, the extra biblical writings, who did what. And Irenaeus actually said that the birth pangs time that Jesus talked about starts when Israel comes back. And at that point, knowledge would increase because we would see more and more prophecies fulfilled. So when we're confused at, say, 20 prophecies, and in the next 5 years, 10 of them are fulfilled, and we know exactly what the symbols mean, we should be able to understand the rest of them pretty accurately. So that was kind of a common teaching all the way through the early church.
That's absolutely fascinating. What an exciting time to be alive. And one of the most important things about the Essenes and the Dead Sea Scrolls, one of the most fascinating things to me anyway, is, and I know to you too, is the Essene calendar. And you write about that in this book, and you specifically bring up the scroll 4Q252 through 254. What is the Essene calendar? What did you discover about it? What if anything, does it say about our time today?
Well, basically, it's the same calendar in the Bible. And of course, I can't verify this because I'm not 2,000 years old. But their concept is God gave a calendar, kind of like in Genesis when it says, observe the seventh day Sabbath and keep the cycle going. It's a calendar type thing. And so their idea is that creation started on the fourth, or the creation week rather, the fourth day of that week is when the sun, moon, and stars were created, and that's when you can start a calendar count. So their New Year's always starts on a Wednesday, and they say that the weeks were never altered. So theoretically, our Sabbath Saturday is still Saturday. So, and again, I can't really prove that, but that's what they teach. And they basically started going through beginning to beginning. They
Hey, Jay, good to see you, mate.
to Shemitahs, to Jubilees, to Onas, to ages, and they have this count. And the neat thing about it is they have in 11Q13, it talks about the Melchizedekian priest, who is God incarnate, would come and pay some sort of penalty to erase the debt of our iniquities. And that somehow reconciles us to God and starts the age of grace. And it says that this time period, or the event, whatever the event is that takes this, and of course we know that to be his death on the cross, but the event is one Shemitah after the end of the 9th Jubilee of their Ona in that age. And so if you plug that into our calendar, it comes out to 32 AD, give or take a year, but so I'm not arguing dates per se, but that's pretty accurate. And that gives us an idea of the end of our age as being 2075. So we're getting ready to enter that last Jubilee in about a year and a half. So that's when time really comes up. In the book, I also have
Okay, it's only 2 hours old.
Several quotes where they talk about the idea that during the middle time period, just in general, not too many prophecies are fulfilled. But when you near the end of an age, especially, or sometimes even the end of a Jubilee period, you have a lot more prophecies fulfilled. And so that's why I was guessing, we probably wouldn't see much of anything until at least 2 years from now. And I was wrong, happily. But there's a lot of things going on, and not just the Israeli-Hamas war and Hezbollah, which are all prophesied in Scripture, and then several other things. But all these things begin a time period, and there's other things in the scrolls too that talk about that.
When we talk about jubilees, is there a difference between a jubilee and a generation, or is the concept of those the same? Is a generation 50 years?
Good question.
Generally speaking, a generation is from the birth of a person to the birth of their firstborn son. And so, in other words, like if I was a king, I'd be ruling when my firstborn son was born. That begins his generation. And then, or sometimes it's actually when I take over and when he takes over. But generally, it's a generational count. So it's an unknown number of years. If I had a child when I was 15 or when I'm 50, my first, it just all depends. A jubilee is always 50 years, period. But sometimes, depending on the prophecy, there's prophecies about, like in Enoch, it talks about a 70 generational count from Enoch's time to the Messiah. And when we look that up in Luke, that was exactly correct. Now, I did some math on it, though. I took the time period of its start and its ending.
Paradise is not just a destination. It's
Ending. Divided it by 70 for the generations, just to see how many years an average generation is. And it came out to be 48.9 or something like that on average. I thought that was pretty interesting. But sometimes, though, in the text, they will use them interchangeably. And the way you can do this is you can look through the New Testament when it's talking about generations, and then go back, especially if it's quoting an Old Testament one, and go back and look that up, and then flip it over to the Septuagint and see what Greek word is used, and you'll come to find out a lot of times that Jubilee is a generation.
That's really interesting. So when Jesus says that this generation will not pass, do you think that that's just like, it just means that the generation that's alive, there's not going to be a new generation that comes after that before all these things are fulfilled? Or do you think that he was speaking about a specific time period?
I've always thought that he just means a general generation like that. So in other words, there's still someone alive that saw the beginning that will see the end. So when it starts, for instance, it's not going to last 200 years because nobody would still be around. But then again, what is interesting to me is the rapture hasn't happened yet. Some of the major prophecies, tribulation, Antichrist hasn't happened yet. And if it doesn't happen in the next year and a half, it'll be the same thing. It will be in that last generation or that last Jubilee. So, it could happen at any time, but to me, it's interesting that they would change those around, and it could mean either or.
Yeah, that makes sense. And either way we look at it, it really seems like we're heading towards that time now. So the Dead Sea Scrolls were kept by the Zadokian priesthood in Qumran. What set the Qumran beliefs apart from other beliefs at the time, say of the Pharisees and Sadducees and others?
Well, basically, they talked a lot about. Well, the idea is that there are just Jews. And basic Judaism is Judaism, the way it has always been taught. And they say they are the real original Jews with the real original theology. So, and what they teach is that there's one God, but somehow he manifests in three forms, as Messiah, as Hashem, and as the Ruach HaKodesh. And they're prophets. They know the Holy Spirit very well. So they have that concept. That we have a sin nature. Messiah comes to die for our sin nature. Many texts like that. Like they talk about the fact that the teacher of righteousness came and was killed by an evil priest approximately 40 years before the destruction of the temple. So there's a whole lot of details in there. But that's their theology. And the idea is somewhere along the line, cults sprung up. And so you got Pharisees and Sadducees, and somehow the cults took over the government. So it's much like you and I being a Christian, and we believe that same story about the death, burial, and resurrection of the Messiah, and say there's some Christian cult that doesn't believe Jesus even existed and all this kind of stuff, and somehow they become president, take over the United States, and that's what we would be in that same boat then. It's like, no, we're the real Christians, these guys are cults. And that's their story. Of course, the Sadducees and Pharisees tell the opposite. But what I think is interesting is in the scriptures, we're told that the Sadducees don't believe in spirits. They don't believe in the Holy Spirit. So once you're dead, you're dead. There is no life afterwards. And that's obviously not scriptural. And the Pharisees believed some of that, but not others.
It's not loaded.
And so just by going by the New Testament, which I would as a Christian, I would say all those guys are wrong. And it's fascinating to me because a Jew today, an Israeli, is taught, ignore Christians, they're a cult.
No.
The rabbis say totally different story. Okay, so that makes sense. But then you dig up the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are theoretic.
Nah, boss, I don't like him anymore. Israeli News Live, I don't like him anymore.
Their great grandfathers that tell the story. We believe just like the Christians. We're waiting for it to happen just like the Christians said it did. And there's going to be an apostasy hit that's going to tell you the opposite. Well, that's the rabbis. So no matter how you look at it, there's two different sides. It's not that Christians invented the New Testament. There's always been these two sides. So you have to decide whether you're going to believe rabbinical Judaism or your great grandfathers. So it's one of those things. And that is an amazing position for the Lord to put them in. Paul says in Romans that eventually all Israel will be saved. So they will become a messianic nation eventually. And I see the Dead Sea Scrolls as playing a major part of that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, for sure. People seem to be waking up more and more to it the more time goes on. One question that I always get a lot, and I'm sure you do too, is why don't we see, the word Essene, or why don't we see the Essenes mentioned in the Bible, or are they in the gospel somewhere under a different name? If we were to try to point out where the Essenes are in the Bible, why don't we have that word, and where would we point to show, well, this is what it means, these are the Essenes?
Yeah, well, number one, remember they said that they are the original Jews, and they tend to refer to themselves as Jews. And so that word is all the way through the New Testament. But the thing is, the word Essene is a Greek word that means healer. And that's basically what the Greek people would call them. The Hebrew people would call them the sons of Zadok, or just the priest, that kind of thing. Which is interesting if you think about it. You've got the real Zadok priests that are supposed to be ruling, and you've got this cult that comes up that takes over.
That's what might have happened to my laptop when the last stream shut down fast.
So what do? They call themselves Sadducee or Zadoki, trying to convince people they are the real Zadok priests and not. So you see that kind of stuff in there. So other than that, it's not mentioned a whole lot, because I think mainly when you give a name to someone, you're doing it because there's a problem. We're all Jews. We're waiting for Messiah. That's all we need to know, except that nut over there. So we got to give him a name, a Sadducee, a Pharisee, a Samaritan. Samaritans might be nice people, but they only took like the first 5 books of the Old Testament. They reject everything else. Okay, they're nuts. It's just, so we're going to call them this name. We're going to call them that name, not in a bad way, but just to label them. So you've got this, but you've got a lot of Essenes. For instance, in Acts chapter, I think it's chapter 13, it's when the prophets came down from Antioch to lay hands on Barnabas and Paul and anoint them for ministry. It says that there were 3 major guys that came down. One of them was in our Bible, it says Manaen, who was with Herod in his household. Okay, so that tells us everything we need to know. The Hebrew way of saying that name is Menachem, and there's a whole history of Menachem the Essene, how he ran the Sanhedrin, and then when they begin to apostatize, he said, no, I'm keeping the original teaching and I leave. So they call him a heretic.
Yeah.
He leaves and kind of disappeared.
Yeah, that sounds like right, doesn't it, Vast? Because it doesn't usually shut down my laptop unless it's my fault.
And that's when Hillel takes over. So Hillel and Shammai, 2 of the main famous rabbis. But what happens is, he's a Christian, he's waiting, and he comes down at this point. He's got to be at least in his 90s or 100, 102, something like that at least, to anoint Paul, coming down from Antioch all the way to Jerusalem. And it's interesting because they're called Essenes, meaning healers, but they have this concept that if you do the herbal medicine and you have a simple lifestyle and you dedicate yourself to the Lord, you normally live to be 120. That's just kind of standard. Almost all of them do. The Pharisees and Sadducees might live to be 70 or 80 if they have a really cushy, place and lots of good food and that kind of stuff. The average Gentile lived to be about 60 back in that day, is from what we understand. So you've got this 90-year-old guy hopping on a donkey and coming all the way down here to anoint Paul. And it's just interesting to see that. He's got to have an Essene diet. He's got to have a long lifespan. He's filled with the Holy Spirit. So obviously he's a Christian. Otherwise he would.
I never knew that. Wow, this is pretty interesting.
Be filled with the Spirit and still prophesying. And so that goes along with what the church fathers say about after the coming of Messiah. Doesn't matter if you're Jew or Gentile, but you have to be a believer in Messiah to experience the gifts. So that's just one example, but there's others in there. And I think we get stuck on the names sometimes. Scribes, by the way, is there's a couple of different kinds of scribes. Some scribes might be referring to Essenes. Other scribes are the ones that just write court documents, scribes. And then there was a scribal group or denomination that I thought was fascinating, because the Pharisees said, we're going to follow this oral Torah. And the Essenes would say oral.
Vast, it's all about Christ. I wouldn't do a 3-hour video if it wasn't about Christ. I just love doing this fellowship with you guys. You learn a lot of new stuff, because I do play a lot of interesting stuff, but it is hard to find decent content, I will admit.
Torah is junk because we have the writings of the patriarchs. So we're following patriarchal history in the Old Testament. The scribes, on the other hand, said we're not going to take sides in that. So we're not going to look at any history, any theology. We're just going to read the Bible and take wild guesses on what we think it means. And I thought it's interesting when you look at it like that, Jesus was always yelling at the scribes and the Pharisees, they're hypocrites. And you can see why. It's like you're trying to teach real history, teach everything correctly, but you don't want to look at history and add it to the Bible or anything like that. So it's really interesting to see. We kind of have that parallel today in our society. People will say, well, let's not look at the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's not in the Bible. But it's mentioned. It's part of history. It's kind of important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And yeah, it is important. And also, if it was included in the Bible would be so big nobody would have the time to read it. I mean, it's already hard enough to even get Christians to read the Bible with the length. Imagine if it was twice or three times the size. Something that the Dead Sea Scrolls do, which is really interesting, is they provide commentaries on biblical texts that we're familiar with. And in some of those commentaries, there's a lot of prophecy that can be found. And you dedicated a whole section of your book to prophetic commentaries. I'd love to go through some of these and just have you talk about what you found in these commentaries that really stuck out. So let's start with the Genesis commentary. What's in there and what stuck out to you prophetically?
Well, number one, they go through and they give us chapter 7 of Genesis, the flood account and everything, but they will plug in the actual dates. Our Genesis says that the flood occurred on the 17th of the second month in the 600th year of Noah's life. So that's ER 1656 on the calendar. But they would actually go so far as to say, well, that day was Sunday, and it was this, and it was that. So they give you all the days of the week, all that kind of stuff. If their calendar is correct, and that's the one that has always been used, those dates would be absolutely correct. So it's really neat to see that kind of stuff. And when you look at prophecies and comments and other scriptures, that corroborates it. So, for instance, I've always wondered when Jesus said something happens and 3 days later this other thing happened. Why does it say 3 days later? Because I have no clue when it started. There's no way I can figure out when it happened. It's a waste of time. There's no way to figure it out. If you use the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, you'll know exactly what day it is. If it's a festival or if it's close to a Sabbath or whatever, it just clicks. And so it makes sense because the scripture wouldn't add other stuff like that. But there's prophecies about the Messiah, the one that would do different things. And we look at those as Christians, like in Genesis, and say, well, that's obviously a prophecy about the Messiah. Modern day Judaism would say, no, it means something else. You got the Dead Sea Scrolls saying, no, it means Messiah. And that's what's fascinating about all.
The future of money is teaching your kids how to manage.
About all of these things.
Yeah, I agree. The calendar to me is really fascinating because you can take that calendar and apply it from Genesis to Revelation. I mean, even the prophetic day counts fit within this calendar. Since it came up, I should mention too for people at home, if you want a print version of this calendar, Dr. Ken Johnson and I do have that available. You can go to his website, BibleFacts.org, or you can go to dailyrenegade.com to get that, or you can just click on the link in the description below. But it's the Dead Sea Scroll calendar with all of the festivals and feasts. Ken put the whole thing together. All I did was just put it into print form. But it also has our regular calendar attached to it. So you can compare like today's date and see if today falls on a feast day, or you can, if a major event happens in Israel, if they start a war or something, or well, they don't really start wars, but if if a battle happens or something, you can look at that date and see, okay, this is on this festival. And it also has all the new festivals too that most of us don't know about. In Leviticus, we have 7 of them mentioned, but in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are as many as 12 from what it appears, which actually, it kind of makes more sense because there's prophecies about like time, and half a time. And that is, that's the word Moedim. It means a festival cycle. Well, if it's only 7, how do you have half of 7? It's either going to be 3/4 or 4/3. You know, you can't really have half. If there's 12, you can have exactly half.
Nah, sometimes I'm reading Diane's links or something, I miss the ads.
So for that, if anybody's interested, you can just click on the link in the description below, or go to BibleFacts.org for Ken's website, or go to dailyrenegade.com for mine. And the proceeds go to help both of our ministries. We split everything down the middle, so you're supporting two great ministries with that. Okay, so yeah, and these commentaries are really fascinating because they do talk a lot about their time and prophecies they were looking forward to, but also some in our time too. What are some of the things that stuck out to you about our time from there's a bunch of commentaries. We wouldn't have time to go through all of them. There's probably at least a dozen or more here in your book. And the way the book's laid out for everybody at home, it's really easy to read. Like Ken will actually, he puts the actual section of the Dead Sea Scrolls and then provides his own commentary and kind of helps explain. So it's really easy to read and really informative. But what are some of the ones that really stuck out to you about our time? What's happening now and what we might be looking forward to in the near future?
Well, in the commentary section, there's some really interesting ones. For instance, I remember going through seminary and we looked at the Valley of Dry Bones. And there were several theories on what it meant. Most of us thought it was prophecy, not resurrection. And some people said, well, it could be 537 BC coming back from Babylon, or 1948, or both. It could just be symbolic, that kind of thing. In the commentary in Ezekiel, though, they have a section on Ezekiel 37. And basically, they have two separate events where the same thing happens. One is when Israel comes back filled with the Spirit, and the other one is when they come back not filled with the Spirit. And so that's pretty obvious because they talk about the fact when they come back under Ezra, Nehemiah, that kind of stuff, they have 11Q13, this concept that the Messiah is God incarnate that dies for their sins. So they're obviously filled with the Spirit. They're following that kind of thing. And when Israel comes back in 1948, they're not messianic. So when you look at that, it's pretty obvious, according to that text, our Ezekiel 37 only has them coming back with not filled with the Spirit. So number one, that tells us that Ezekiel chapter 37 in our Bibles is specifically talking about 1948, period. And I thought that was fascinating. Anytime you can isolate something like that and know for sure, then you begin to see other things instead of speculating on what it might be, or it may prove something else to be wrong. So it's kind of neat to see that, this whole concept, and there's a lot of other things. For instance, in Habakkuk chapter 2, Paul quotes that in 3 places in the New Testament, and he's explaining how the just are saved by faith, not sacrifices, but faith in the Messiah. And he seems to indicate in Galatians that that's how Abraham was saved, by trusting in what the Messiah would do when he comes, however he fixes it. And so modern rabbis would say, no, it's got nothing to do with the Jesus or anything like that. It's just faith in God, that God will take care of things. Well, the commentary specifically says the just live by faith in what the teacher of righteousness will do when he comes. So they make it very, very clear. It can't be faith in potatoes or your church or whatever. It's faith in the Messiah. So again, for us as Christians, it's very clear, but it's an incredible witness to Jews. The just live by faith. You can't live by the law of Moses. I mean, you need to follow that if you're in that culture, but that's not how salvation is based. It's by trusting Messiah. Well, who is Messiah? He's the one that...
Excuse me, can I ask you a favour? It's not for me, it's for my mum.
For my mom.
One that was killed 40 years before the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. The one that did these other things, the one that is bringing salvation, is God incarnate, that does all these things. And so it's repeated over and over again. And there is a ton of first coming prophecies, extra biblical ones, for instance, and then the commentaries on those. And then there are some that are for the second coming, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that because I find that absolutely fascinating too. Before we do, we are going to take a quick break. So everybody just hold on in line. We'll be right back with Ken Dutz. I would ask that you go visit dailyrenegade.com and become a member today. Not only do you get early access to full videos, but there's a lot of things I just can't put out on YouTube for fear that they'll delete videos or delete the entire channel, and I can't put the channel at risk. There are certain things, and those of you who have followed me for a while know, there are certain things that I've made documentaries about that I cannot mention on YouTube, or my entire channel will get removed. A ministry that I previously worked for had this happen recently because of exactly this. So, and I've had this happen multiple times too. So this is why I created Daily Renegade. It's a place where we don't have to worry about censorship. You can go, you can watch all the videos, you can watch the full videos of everything. And there's even a community tab that works pretty much exactly like Facebook without the censorship. So members of Daily Renegade, we can all communicate with each other. You can post, you can put pictures up, you can make your own account. It's really exactly like Facebook. There's just no censorship. Now, again, I do run the site. If I see somebody cussing somebody out, I'm going to remove them. But so far, I have not had one problem with trolls because, let's face it, trolls are pathetic, right? They're not going to spend their own money to go and troll somebody. They'll just do it for free on YouTube. So we'll leave the filth with YouTube. At dailyrenegade.com, we're actually creating something really nice. So the video section works exactly like YouTube. It looks really, really similar. It has the same layout. You get your own profile. You can favorite videos. You can share things. You can comment. I mean, it has the same layout as YouTube. It just does not have the censorship. And it's the same with the community tab. So at dailyrenegade.com, yes, there is a membership fee because there has to be. I'm not rich. I didn't get into full-time ministry to become rich, you know. So I can't afford to do it all on my own. So there is a membership, but that goes towards keeping Daily Renegade afloat. But also it helps with what we're trying to do. We want to make a phone app and a TV app so that Daily Renegade will be even easier to access. Right now, you can go on your phone and just go dailyrenegade.com and it works great. It works beautifully now. We had problems with an earlier website that we went through a different service. We went through Wix and we got rid of that. That's done. So if you're happening to view this and you're thinking, oh, I remember that site from 2 years ago and it was awful, I couldn't do anything. Please, I'm asking you, give us another chance because we have fixed all that. We fixed all the junk. It was expensive to do, but it's because of people supporting Daily Renegade, getting memberships and even donating that we're able to do that. So it works great now, and now we want to take it to the next step. We want to make a phone app and we want to make a TV app. So dailyrenegade.com is where you can get that. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year. And if you can do it, I suggest doing the $100 a year because it's cheaper in the long run. Essentially, you get 2 months for free. I also want to say, too, that we're still collecting donations. So many of you know the situation. I'll run through it very briefly. Two main things. One, 2 weeks before I got the job offer here for Prophecy Watchers, my wife and I had bought a house in Illinois. And once we got the job offer here, we knew it was a calling from God. We knew it. And so we had to take it. And it's great. I mean, I love working at Prophecy Watchers. I love everybody there. Feels like home, feels like a family. And it is a perfect fit for us. But the problem is we are renting a house here in Oklahoma, but we still have a house that we're trying to sell in Illinois. By the way, if you're in the Decatur, Illinois area and you're looking for a really nice 4-bedroom house, let me know. joshpeckdisclosure@gmail.com. It's for sale now. But in the meantime, we don't know how long that house is going to sell. And anybody who knows anything about the economy knows this is a really bad time to try to sell a house. So it's been very difficult financially. It's been financially straining. And especially since, Illinois got hit with some storms and we had to pay to fix some damages there and stuff. We had to put a lot of money into it. So while we're paying for a mortgage there, we're paying for rent at this house. So basically we got 2 huge payments. And I don't know how long that's going to last. The second our house sells, I will tell everybody on here, okay, we're good. You don't have to donate. Well, you don't have to donate at all, but we no longer need donations for our living situation. So we are accepting donations for that. We're also accepting because we have a big family. We have 5 kids, and we're a single income house. You know, Christina stays at home, takes care of the kids, homeschools them, works really, really hard. And then I do my ministry work at Prophecy Watchers, and then on my off time on that, I work on Daily Renegade stuff. And anything that I make for Prophecy Watchers and Daily Renegade, that's it for our entire family. So once our house sells, it's going to be fine, but we just don't know how long that's going to last. And if that lasts months and stuff, we need some kind of savings. And whatever savings we had before, we put into the first house because we thought, well, there's a whole story behind that, why it just, we had to buy the house otherwise we weren't going to have a place to live for much longer. And there's a whole thing. Nobody was unfair to us or anything like that. Like, just the basic story was, I went to go work for Zach and Drew for a while, for about 9 months, and at the time, I wasn't in the best. Just at the time, we were already dealing with financial problems because of our son's healthcare, which I'm going to get into in a minute. But so Zach said, well, I actually have a house that I'm trying to sell.
We're gonna build a train so big it can't be stopped. It's too late to be scared now.
So you can stay in it rent free up until like this time, but by this time, we need to find out if you're going to buy it or if you're going to live somewhere else, or we'll need to figure out what to do because I won't be able to afford to just do that forever. And so that's what it was. So Zach helped us out a lot, but it got to that point, and again, this was 2 weeks before the Prophecy Watchers job offer. So I said, okay, we'll just buy the house from you. We'll make it really easy. You've been really generous. You've been helping us out. We don't have any other place around here where we can rent that can support all of us, you know, so we'll just buy it from you. So we went through that whole process and bought the house, and then yeah, it was like 2 weeks after that I got the Prophecy Watchers job offer. And but again, like, I didn't move to Prophecy Watchers till months after that. So either way, even if I had gotten the job offer before buying the house, I still would have had to buy the house unless I absolutely wanted to financially ruin my very good friend Zach Drew, and there was just no way I was going to do that to him. So
Did you go back to talking with?
Pray for our house to sell. You know, there's a lot of things you can pray for that would help. I don't love having to bring this up every single time, but for my family, absolutely, I'm going to do that. It's especially if you're a man, you know, it's not easy to ask for help. It's not easy to just put your personal details out there and admit when you need help. It's not easy, but I'll do anything for my family, and I'm sure you would too. So yeah, every single time I do this, every single time I get comments, I get emails, I get people that get annoyed that I'm even bringing it up. And I'll get comments that say, well, the gospel should be free. The gospel is free. I'm not selling the gospel. I'm not telling you that you have to give anything. You don't. But if you feel led, you know, not just for me, you know, for my
Amen, Vas. He'll sell his home.
Family, for my kids. If you feel led, it would be incredibly helpful. And I'm not going to promise that you're going to get anything from it. That's up to God. I'm never going to be the kind of guy that says, you know, sow a seed and you know, if you do this, God will reward you. I don't know what God's going to do. And that shouldn't be why you give anyway. You should never give to get a reward for yourself. If you're giving because you're expecting God to reward you in some way, I'd rather you just not give at all. Because that's like spiritually dangerous territory for you to be in. And yeah. I would suggest getting some actual good, solid foundational teaching of the teachings of Jesus and what he means when he says, when he tells us to give with a cheerful heart and all that stuff. You don't expect things in return. We know that we're getting rewards in heaven. We know all that, but you shouldn't expect anything in return. All it is it's a gift that would really help us out a lot. And if anything, I mean, it helps. It makes it a little easier for me to make these videos. If I don't constantly have this stuff on my mind or have to plan out what we're going to do financially for the next bill, because all that stuff takes time. So I mean, if anything, you know, you'll get more videos, but I'm not gonna say that any promises come from any of that. It's just a nice thing that would help us, and we'd appreciate it. But again, do it if the Lord leads you. If not, no worries. Just pray. If you can pray, that'd be great. So again, paypal.me/JoshPeckDisclosure or Cash App $ Josh Scott Peck. And we have not set a PO box up yet, but we will very soon. I actually just keep forgetting about it because we have so much stuff to do. We have so many things day to day that we have to focus on. We are still in that transition period, but we're getting through it. And actually, it's really been great. I do have some other links and things in the description below. I did recently take part in a webinar that's available or will be available at the end of May, I believe, at paulbegleyprophecy.com, and I talked about upcoming magnetic pole shifts, what that might have to do with prophecy, talked a little bit about geographic pole shifts, how all this relates.
I do remember that, Bas. It was about 6 months ago. You're really battling, weren't you? He come through, though, didn't he? Amen.
To Bible prophecy, a lot of revelation in there. So I'd suggest checking out that webinar, Paul Begley Prop.
Our Cobra ticks pretty much every box there is. They don't settle for anything less than formation into the Brazilian South America.
We are witnessing the formation of a one world government. And ladies and gentlemen, it's happening a lot faster than we think. All right, folks,
I'll stick around for this one because I usually go 3 hours and I've only gone 2.5 so far. So I'll finish with this one.
Get into this one. I'm going to tell you this right now. You are going to see some things that you have seen before. But as we get further into these videos, I am going to show you a few things that you probably have not seen. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you have the same reaction that I had, it's going to make you a little sick to your stomach. But I will tell you, it is exciting from the perspective that we know that Christ could come at any moment. And the world that we are watching right now is literally going through a formation that is quickly driving into a new world order. Literally a one world.
Fast, did you see the molecule that holds everything together is shaped like a cross?
Government. And we see examples after examples after examples of all of this moving in a very rapid pace. But I can tell you this right now, folks, what we are seeing is completely unprecedented. The mindset, the heart by which people are pursuing these things, the very things that we're seeing happening in front of us is absolutely unbelievable. So we have to start off by going through the book of Revelation. So here it is. We'll read out of Revelation chapter 13. We'll start in verse 16. It says this, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, for the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So what we know based on Revelation chapter 13 is that the final Antichrist will require of the world to show their allegiance and their willingness to worship him. And the way that they will show that allegiance is to have a number 666 put on their forehead or on their right hand. And without that, they will not be able to buy or sell. And we are looking at a world right now that is absolutely setting us up for that position and in that place. And one of the things that we should understand and know is that we can't get to this place unless we get to a cashless society. And we certainly can't get to this place until we are in the condition of a one world government. And folks, we have been seeing people make calls for a one world government for as long as I can remember, but the calls are becoming more extreme and the things that are being communicated are a lot more significant. So before we start looking at all of these newer stories and newer videos of what's going on, let's talk about some guys that have been doing this for quite some time. Joe Biden himself calling for a new world order. We'll watch that video, and then right after we will talk about King Charles, who in the time that this video was made, he was Prince Charles. And when you see this, folks, understand, as big as those videos were at the time that they were released, you ain't seen nothing yet, because when I show you some videos that are actually giving you a better picture of what the world is seeking to do, it will open your eyes to see some things that are going to make you sick. The reality of it is we should find a lot of peace in it, because we know that as we approach the final day, there is peace and there is hope for us, because we know where it all ends. So let's get into this. We've seen these calls for a new world order before. We've seen people call for money to change hands in a very different way when it talks to the way we deal with currency. We've seen all of these things happen. Let's go over a few of these videos that we've seen in the past. I think they're kind of important. So let's take a look at them.
You know, we are at an inflection point, I believe, in the world economy.
Yeah.
Not just the world economy, in the world. It occurs every 3 or 4 generations. As one of the top military people said to me in
I don't know how to look it up, Bas, the DNA cross.
a secure meeting the other day, 60 million people died between 1900 and 1946. And since then, we've established a liberal world order, and that hadn't happened in a long while. A lot of people dying, but nowhere near the chaos. And now is a time when things are shifting. There's going to be a new world order out there. And we've got to lead it. We've got to unite the rest of the free world in doing it.
Wow.
So anyway, notice the shift in terminology, folks. Notice that the president actually talks about a liberal world order and then starts talking about a new world order. He corrects himself. Why? Because he is being reflective of terminology that's being utilized in a top secret meeting. He just disclosed to us that he was in a top secret meeting, highly confidential meeting, and he's talking about a conversation that he's having in it, and the discussion in that meeting relates to a new world order. And folks, these people are not apologetic about this. These people continue to be very public about their views concerning these issues, especially these elitists. Look at what Prince Charles said. At the time he was Prince Charles, now he's King Charles. But look at his view. Look at the things that he said here at COP26. We've talked about this on multiple occasions. And then I'm going to show you something that he did even recently as King Charles. And then I'm going to show you a few other things, again, that are going to remind you of the direction that the world has been going in. Then wait until you see the new videos that I'm going to show you. It is absolutely just mind-boggling, okay? Watch what happens here with Prince Charles at the time. He's now King Charles.
Genuinely renewable and sustainable. So, ladies and gentlemen, my plea today is for countries to come together to create the environment that enables every sector of industry to take the action required. We know this will take trillions, not billions of dollars.
Trillions. Not billions, folks, trillions. Can you understand when we start talking about trillions, how much money that actually is? He is talking about the elimination of cash. And if you don't think that's the case, continue to listen to what he's saying here. And by the way, we're going to move on because this is old news. This is super old news. But I still want you to understand the mindset that people are approaching in looking at all this stuff.
We also know that countries, many of whom are burdened by growing levels of debt, simply cannot afford to go green. Here we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector.
Wow. Get a military on them if they don't go green is basically what he's saying. Wow.
Here we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector. Let me tell you what that means. That means we are going to use the private sector to, in essence, bolster military force, style force, to force people to comply with our ideals in the name of climate change. By the way, much more on climate change to come. Take a listen.
With trillions at his disposal, far beyond global GDP.
Wait, trillions at whose disposal? Who's he talking about? His. Trillions at his disposal. Guys, that was not a Freudian slip. It was not an error that was made in his representation. It was a carefully calculated statement referring to a very specific person. Let's not get this twisted. This is very, very real.
Yep.
Look what he goes on to say. If you think that that's not the case, he is going to make a very aggressive.
I think $1 trillion is 1,000 billion. In fact, I know it is. $1 trillion is 1,000 billion.
Move into getting you to believe that there isn't enough cash in the world or collective governments in the world to solve the problem of climate change. Listen to what he says.
Far beyond global GDP, and with the greatest respect, beyond even the governments of the world's leaders, it offers the only real prospect.
Oh, so, but he's got all the answers. All the world leaders can't get it, but he can. Wow, the arrogance.
For economic transition.
Notice what he says. It's the only real prospect for fundamental economic transition. What does he mean when he says that? Come on, folks. We know what he means when he says that. Understand what he means when he says that. This is not a small issue here. What he is actually talking about is significant. It is absolutely substantial. I do not want you to look at this and think that this is some small thing. Now, I've spent a lot of time talking about this. And there may be a lot of people that may have not seen this before, but he's calling in essence for the Antichrist to come. And he's...
Yeah, vast. I believe in climate change. It wasn't man caused that. It's not caused by man. We know it's caused by.
Doing it in the name of the global crisis, which is climate change. That's what he's saying, folks. And if you don't believe me, look at what he says the next time he speaks at COP20. What is it? I think it was COP28 at this point, when he's in the UAE. And look at the last part of what he says. Tell me if there's nothing more demonic than what he says. Look at the last part of what he says here.
And sacred system. Harmony with nature must be maintained. The earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth.
The earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. You just understand the con that's being given to you? Do you understand what they're trying to tell you? They're basically trying to tell you the exact opposite of what God told you in Genesis chapter 1. He told mankind to subdue the earth. He told mankind to be fruitful and multiply. He actually told mankind to use every resource available to them in the earth to accomplish his purposes.
Yep.
We were not created for the earth. The earth was created for us.
Yeah.
The earth was not made in the likeness and image of God. We were.
Yeah, I'm not big into math either, Vast. I'm not big on maths.
Created in the likeness and image of God. But that's a whole separate story because, folks, they are going crazy with this and they are running very quickly in the direction of the final Antichrist. They are moving very fast to that place. Why? Because the Bible says that in the last days, we would see this. This isn't anything that should actually surprise us. We see it again and again and again and again. And they're doing this through things like all kinds of population control, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. They want to control your money. They actually want to get to the point where your money is rendered completely ineffective. Look at this video. We've watched it a million times. I've shown this to you again and again and again. Here's a central banker literally telling you, we want to control you. Look what this central banker says here. Watch this.
Now, in all our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash. And there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that.
Let's go back and play this to where he looks down and he says absolute control. He is looking at a scripted document here. Watch it when he looks down. Look at when he looks down, what he actually says when he starts looking down. Look what he says.
Is that central bank will have absolute control.
Will have, and he looks down, absolute control. He's reading off of a script here, folks.
On the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that.
To enforce what? To enforce their absolute control. Folks, let me read this one more time. Revelation chapter 13, verse 17. That no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So you have to have the mark of the beast in order to be able to do any of these things like buying or selling. Folks, none of this should be a surprise. The Bible told us to expect this. We've seen the old Amazon commercials.
Yeah.
We've watched about the mindset of how things are going to work out, how they're going to get you to comply. I have shown you 1,000,000 times the CEO of Pfizer telling you that they're going to force you into compliance with the new pill technology that they have. If you haven't heard that, let me play that for you. Take a listen to this. It's very, very eye-opening.
Basically biological chip that it is in the tablet. And once you take the tablet and dissolves into your stomach, sends a signal that you took the tablet. So imagine the applications of that, compliance. The insurance companies to know that the medicines that patients should take.
Compliance, folks. That's the main purpose. They want to gain compliance. That is the direction that they're going in, folks. And that brings us to a story that I think is a really, really, really important story, because one of the countries that is going to or try to stand in the way from keeping this new world order from taking place is the United States of America. America has always been traditionally the country that has been in the way of these things happening. And guess what? America is going to get out of the way whether or not it wants to get out of the way. Right now, it appears as though they want to actually get out of the way and open up the door for this globalist mentality. But folks, it's going to be forced. Let me read this article to you about BRICS, because this is important. We're moving in this direction. The article says BRICS. China dumps the largest U.S. treasuries in history. Let me read the article. It says this. BRICS member China dumped a record number of U.S. treasuries and agency debt bonds worth a staggering $53.3 billion. Historically, this is the largest sell-off initiated by China ever recorded and occurred during the first quarter of 2024. The sell-off data comes at a time when the US dollar fell to its 1-month low at 104.20. Folks, understand this, and I want you to recognize what's happening here. Treasury bonds are the type of things that we have been able to use as a country to guarantee that we will pay off debt that we actually bring on from other countries or other people. And if you want to make sure you get your money back, you go buy a bond, and those bonds will give you some money back with some interest, and everything works. And nobody ever doubted them, because the United States Treasury has always been strong and the US dollar has always been strong. But when you begin to have people selling off treasury notes, like internal banks here in the United States of America, as we've been watching some of these banks fail, and you begin to see that happening with China, and you begin to see it happening with other countries, it means they are losing confidence in the US dollar, or they're trying to take the US dollar, or they're doing both. And I am guessing that what's happening right now is they are absolutely doing both. Let me read this to you. This is pretty heavy. It says China and other BRICS countries have been offloading U.S. treasuries worth billions since 2022. The communist country has a record of dumping the highest in the last 2 years. The development indicates that BRICS and other developing countries want to move away from owning U.S. assets in their reserves. The uncontrolled debt of $34.4 trillion, folks, yes, $34.4 trillion is worrisome, making BRICS rely on local currencies and not the dollar. In addition, even a close ally of the United States, Belgium, dumped $22 billion worth of treasuries during the same period. This shows that even European nations are beginning to distance themselves from the U.S. economy, including selling off bonds and treasuries. Folks, understand this. If we have close allies like Belgium beginning to sell these, that
is pretty bad.
Means the US dollar is in absolutely massive trouble. It is really, 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 really bad. Let me continue to read this. It says this. It says, while BRICS member China is selling US treasuries, it's massively accumulating gold in its reserves. China and the BRICS alliance are the largest buyers of gold in 2022, 2023, and even 2024. Last year alone, China purchased several tons of gold worth $550 billion to its reserves. China and the BRICS bloc are moving further away from the US dollar treasuries and government debt bonds. Let me read this quote by Stephen Chu, who is the chief Asia foreign exchange and rate strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence. Look what he says. He says, as China is selling both, despite the fact that we are closer to a Fed rate cut cycle, there should be a clear intention of diversifying away from US dollar holdings. Folks, that's kind of a big deal, right? Look what he goes on to say. China's selling of US securities could speed up as US-China trade war resumes. And folks, this will get even more complicated if Trump becomes a president, because he will pick up where he last left off. Now, why is this important? This is important because even if the United States of America says we're not going to get involved with the efforts of these people in the World Economic Forum and all of these other nations who are trying to get rid of this dollar, we're going to force it to happen unilaterally, because the way that we can do that and effectively accomplish it is by devaluing the fiat currency, which is the US dollar, by selling off a bunch of treasury notes and bonds. And of course, we will, in essence, defeat the problem that we have in front of us that's keeping us from becoming a globalist regime, basically. So think about the kind of mindset that's being approached here and understand we're moving more and more in that direction. And then I'm looking at this other article, and this article says, climate scientist calls for mass depopulation to fight global warming. Folks, this is no joke, okay? This is no joke. And this is this scientist who's over at the World Economic Forum, and it says this. It says a top government climate scientist has called for a major culling of the human population in order to fight global warming. Professor Bill McGarry argues that a pandemic with a very high fatality rate is required to wipe out a large portion of the human race. According to McGarry, a mass depopulation event is the only realistic way to avoid a catastrophic climate breakdown. McGarry, a professor of geophysical and climate hazards at University College London, said the quiet part out loud in a post on X on Sunday. Folks, I kid you not. This is crazy, and there are people that really believe this, right? Look at what he says. I'm going to quote it. We'll actually show you the post as I'm reading it. It says, if I'm brutally honest, the only realistic way I see emissions failing as fast as they need to avoid catastrophic climate breakdown is the culling of human population by a pandemic with a very high fatality rate. He's calling for the extermination of a large portion of the world. He sounds like Hitler. Folks, he sounds like Hitler. But this is the mindset that these people have. Like, I'm not kidding you. They really, truly believe that if they're going to save the world, they're going to save the world by doing these things. And there are people again and again and again and again and again who are saying this and reiterating it and actually believe this nonsense. This stuff is so evil, folks. It's becoming very difficult to explain to people why this is so dangerous, because so many are walking brainwashed by the lies that are oftentimes accompanying the demands of climate change, right? So look at what it goes on to say. It says members of the unelected World Economic Forum have been long pushing this anti-human agenda. And look what it goes on to say. The Switzerland-based globalist organization recently revealed details of a so-called Noah's Ark that will supposedly save the elite during an event that would wipe out most humans on Earth. The World Economic Forum global elites say that they will be saved from depopulation while the rest are left to drown. Folks, we heard Yuval Harari actually talk about this. He talked about this Noah Ark Noah's Ark that would be created for the elitists while everybody else died, and he actually thought that this would be a wonderful thing. He actually thought that this would be a great way, and it's absolutely terrible, right? Matter of fact, Yuval Harari, in one of these recent panels in the World Economic Forum, literally said that there were plans for a mass depopulation event, assuring globalist elites that they would be spared. No joke, folks. He says, if bad comes to worse, when the flood comes, the scientists will build a Noah's Ark for the elite, leaving the rest to drown.
If bad comes to worse, then when the flood comes, the scientists will build a Noah's Ark for the elite, leaving the rest to drown, the rest of the people and then the rest of the ecosystem.
This is no joke. Folks, this is exactly what he thinks. Notice what he says. He also goes on to say that this plan that they're developing doesn't benefit the vast majority of civilization, and he actually doesn't care. How about BlackRock CEO Larry Fink, a real special guy, for lack of a better term, right? He goes on to talk about countries that depopulate will be big winners in the New World Order. So he wants to incentivize countries that kill off most of their citizens and wants to make them a greater entity if they're willing to do this type of thing. As a matter of fact, let me show you the video where Larry Fink actually talks about this. And this one, again, more than enough to just make you sick to your stomach. Let me play this video. It's actually wild. Watch this.
I can argue in the developed countries, the big winners are countries that have shrinking populations. That's something that most people never talked about. You know, we always used to think shrinking population is a cause for negative growth. But in my conversations with the leadership of these large developed countries that have xenophobic immigration policies, they don't allow anybody to come in, shrinking unemployment, shrinking demographics, these countries will rapidly develop robotics and AI and technology. And if the promise, I didn't say it's going to happen, but if the promise of all that transforms productivity, which most of us think it will, we'll be able to elevate the standard of living of countries, the standard.
So you understand the argument here. We kill off people so that we can make AI and robots and so on and so forth, and we'll elevate the standard of living that people actually have. We'll feed into the elite, like Revelation chapter 6 talks about. We won't mess with the oil and the wine, but we will lead into the death, the annihilation of a massive amount of people. Look what he continues to say. This is very evil stuff, folks, but pay attention.
We'll be able to elevate the standard of living of countries, the standard of living of individuals, even with shrinking populations. And so the paradigm of negative population growth is going to be changing. And the social problems that one will have in substituting humans for machines is going to be far easier.
So he's saying we create a condition by which a country has a declining population. And then when we start replacing human beings with robots to create a more elite circumstance or in a more elite style of living for the rich and the wealthy, then it will become a lot more acceptable because it will be the new way of life. That's actually what he's talking about. Eliminate the population of people, substitute it for robots and AI that are subservient to the wealthy and to the richest, and then you'll have a better life. This is what he's talking about, folks. This is what he continues to say.
In those countries that have declining populations. And so for those countries that have rising populations, the answer will be education, and so rapidly develop,
The answers will be education. What is he talking about, education? Meaning we're going to educate people how to kill off their population. That's what he's talking about, folks. And now he's going to bring in a rule of law and how the rule of law actually drives the idea.
Slumberland Essentials is the perfect blend of affordability and comfort. European stretch knit fiber.
Idea of the elimination of a whole population of people. Look what he says.
Those countries that do not have a foundation of rule of law or education, they're going to be left. That's where the divide's going to get more and more extreme. And
it's absolutely crazy, folks. What we're seeing right now is a growing belief of this lie. And it is happening, and we are rapidly running towards a new world order, okay? Look at what the World Economic Forum has been saying. Folks, they have been saying this kind of stuff for as far back as I can remember. They have been saying this again and 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 again over the years, and they continue to believe it and they continue to propagate it. Let's watch this video. It's about a minute and a half, and this is the World Economic Forum producing this video demonstrating these same principles. Look at what they talk about, folks. Look at the things that they say that you should be expecting. 8 predictions for the world in 2030. Here it is. Watch this. Focus on that. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Tell me how that works. I'll tell you how that works. When the Antichrist is ruling, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Watch how they explain this point number 1. Look at what they say you're going to do so that you'll be happier. This is crazy. Watch this. Whatever you want, you'll rent, and it'll be delivered to you by a drone. Like, think about this for a second. Whatever you want, you'll rent, and it'll be delivered to you by a drone. Look at how they're nominalizing the complexity of your brain. They want to brainwash you into thinking somehow you'll be happy since you're not owning property or anything else to have a drone fly in front of you and drop off your lunch. This is how they're thinking, folks. Look at item number 2. And for those of you that want to so quickly surrender the United States of America to an ungodly, wicked world, look at what they say about the United States of America. This is a World Economic Forum. Look at what they say. See that for point number 2? The United States will not be the world superpower, the dominating world superpower. As a matter of fact, what we'll do is we'll give that power to a few nations, but they're not telling you they ideally control. I'll bet you the few nations that they're talking about are the same 10 nations that will be given to the final Antichrist. Oh yeah, it's happening. We see it. Look at number 3. It's interesting. You will not die waiting for an organ donation because there's a printer that's going to print an organ that gets stuck in your body. Tell me, how well do you think that's going to work? And even if it does work well, what do you think is going to happen when you now stand at the mercy of the organ printers, not the organ donors? Can we see how twisted this is? Look at their item number 4. This one is particularly reprehensible to me. Watch this. You'll eat much less meat. So no meat eating. It'll be an occasional treat, but not a staple. Sorry, it's going to be a staple for me, and it will always be a staple for me. But here we go. By the way, did you notice that the reason why they say it's actually going to be a good thing to not eat meat all the time is so it's going to help the environment? You tell me how that works. You can call me an uneducated bozo, but the reality of it is I don't see the connection, and I certainly hope you don't see the connection. Notice how they're saying in point number 5, people will be displaced by climate change. Look at their explanation for this, and I'll explain why this is so destructive. We'll have to do a better job at welcoming and integrating refugees. Isn't this funny how they're talking about refugees years before they start talking about the insanity of what's happening in Gaza and other places around the world? These are politically motivated ideals based on emotionally charged principles that are designed to get your mind and heart focused away from being patriots. Because if you're no longer a patriot, then you're not going to care about the population in general, and you will start thinking a lot more from a secular humanistic perspective. That's what they want you to do here. There will be a global price on carbon. That means if you don't have a whole bunch of money to pay, you can't fly on an airplane. If you don't have a whole bunch of money to pay, you'll be able to drive your car. The people who are grossly polluting the environment will continue to do so because they've got lots of money, because they're charging you for minorly polluting the environment. Folks, This is an elitist world that is seeking to destroy your freedoms. Wait till you see point number 7. This one gets even more interesting. You could be preparing to go to Mars. Scientists will have worked out how to keep you healthy in space. We're going to send you off. We're going to get rid of you. We don't want you on this earth. Isn't it funny how that works? This is the mindset that they have, folks. Notice when it talks about Western values. Let me go back and rewind this because this is really, really important for you to see this. I'll just show you the screenshot. It says Western values will have been tested to the breaking point. Let me tell you what that translation is. That is translation for we will eliminate Christianity. We will remove the Judeo-Christian influence in the West so that nobody opposes us with what we're doing. I'll bet you anything that the way that they destroy Judeo-Christian influence in the West is by creating an explanation on how they've been ejected from the earth when they're raptured. How much do you want to bet that we're looking at something like that? Look what it goes on to say. It's just crazy, folks. Look at what they go on to say, folks. Let me show you the screenshot. Checks and balances that underpin our democracies must not be forgotten. What are the checks and balances that underpin their democracies? The mark of the beast. You think about this, folks. The idea that we are looking at is we are seeing a world that is driving us very quickly into Revelation 13. Folks, we are rapidly approaching this world, and what we need to do more than ever is open our eyes, see what is happening, wake up, understand what's in front of us, and live with the knowledge of the fact that times are changing and they are changing rapidly. We know what God is in the midst of doing. We know the plans that he has for us, and we need to live according to our understanding of those plans because we are running out of time. Folks, we are seeing it here. We are in the last days. We're watching this new world order. We're watching all of these things take place. It's time for us to wake up. Let's fight the good fight, folks.
Amen.
We're running out of time. God bless you.